Welcome everyone, Joe with ECRM here at our convenience session, and with me is Chris Castagli with NIQ, and today we're going to talk about trends in health and wellness and how that's impacting the convenience industry. So thanks for joining us. And first, to start off, can you give an overview of what's happening in the C-store segment?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me. When we look at the C-store segment overall, it's a massive player in the industry. When you look at the consumer packaged good products plus food service, we're talking $193 billion plus per year. So obviously a massive player in the space. But what we've seen over the last couple of years is challenge, especially challenge that's been fueled really by the economy and where the consumer is. Now, if we take a step back from that and think about the C-store channel overall, there's around 152,000 C-stores in the United States. So obviously a massive footprint. And we've seen not only are there more stores, but we've also seen the average square footage of those stores getting larger. So for a consumer, that means you've got more places to shop and you have a wider assortment of products in the store just because they're getting larger. They have more space. Despite the fact we have more stores, despite the fact we have bigger stores, we've actually seen over the last 2 years, C-store units and dollars have declined. So we're certainly seeing some challenges there. And I think a lot of that is really being driven by what's happening in the economy.
Okay, so inflation's having an impact, or at least perception of prices that are going up?
Absolutely, yeah. So when you look at the average consumer, around 86% would tell you that they're seeing prices today that are higher than they were a year ago. And ultimately what this is doing is it's changing the economics of the trip mission today. We've got consumers searching for deals more, cutting back on non-essentials. I think for the C-store, especially for the channel, we're seeing consumers pull back on impulse purchasing. And obviously the convenience channel, the products there are very impulse forward. So I think that's part of the reason that we're seeing some of the challenges in the channel that we're seeing today.
So are they starting to go to C-stores more like a destination and like look with the actual products in mind and not just, oh, I'm going to see whatever's in front?
There are certainly consumers that are making those trips in a very intentional way. I can think of a few C-stores that I frequent, and they are very intentional trips that I make to those specific stores. But what the consumer is shopping for is changing. We know that consumers are drinking less. We know that consumers are smoking cigarettes less. They're leaning into other categories. They're looking for other things. Could be THC beverages. It could be I'm blanking on what they're called. They're like the Zyn packs.
Oh yeah, okay, the nicotine pouches.
Nicotine pouches, exactly. We're seeing consumers lean into those. So while trips for cigarettes are down, trips for those types of products are up significantly in the C-store channel. So we're certainly seeing consumers go in with certain products in mind.
Well, that's what I want to get into and dig into a little bit is health and wellness, right? They're shopping a little healthier, and that's definitely, C-stores are not traditionally known as a health and wellness haven, right? Like you said, booze, cigarettes, that's what they were going for. But now those shoppers are changing. And one of the newest things that has happened that really is impacting is SNAP benefits. What's going on in there, and how is that impacting the C-store shopper?
Sure. Yeah, SNAP benefits are incredibly important, and really the SNAP household is an incredibly important shopper for the convenience channel. When you look at the average SNAP household compared to the average non-SNAP household, we actually see that SNAP households spend more over the course of the year in the convenience channel than non-SNAP households do. Now, their average trip size is smaller. They have fewer dollars to work with, but they're ultimately making more trips over the course of the year. So they're an incredibly valuable shopper for the convenience channel. When you look at the balance of SNAP households in the U.S., there's around 42 million Americans who are on SNAP benefits today, and their purchasing power is somewhere on the magnitude of around $245 billion. So they're an incredibly large and important group of consumers that are especially feeling challenged in today's marketplace with some of the changes we're seeing in SNAP benefits.
Gotcha. Can you talk about some of those changes in detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big things that's been making a lot of headlines are the SNAP benefit waivers. And essentially what these are state level legislative waivers being put in place that limit the types of products that SNAP benefits can be used on. The three that have really had the majority of focus have been candy, soft drinks, and energy drinks. But within that, there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace. Some states talk about soda specifically, energy drinks specifically. Others talk about sugary beverages, and that leads to confusion. Apple juice is a sugary beverage. Orange juice is a sugary beverage. So are those types of products restricted in that state, or are they not? So it creates a lot of confusion.
Whose job is it to figure out at the store level who's supposed to know that?
Ideally, the store's point of sale system already has
Yeah.
those items flagged that are not eligible,
Mhm.
but that leads to the point of friction that I see becoming a bigger problem. It is the point of sale.
Mhm.
You'll have a consumer potentially at the register buying products, trying to use their SNAP benefits, unknowing that the products that they're buying are actually no longer eligible. That burden then falls onto the store associate who's at the register, who themselves may or may not
Yeah.
know the legislative requirements. So while the store is ultimately responsible for it, there are a number of points along the shopping journey where that could become a problem, not only for the shopper, but for the retailer, the associate at the
Mhm.
store, and everybody that falls in between.
Yeah, because then you'll have someone who a week prior had just purchased all of these
Mhm.
products in the store, and then once they go into the restrictions go into effect, they don't know they're just getting those same products, and then half of
Absolutely.
them, if not all of them, are not eligible anymore.
Absolutely.
Then what happens? They get stuck there. They got to return it to the
Right. You have
shelves.
products that either have to get put back on the
Mhm.
shelf, or if it's something that was, it was a cold beverage, a cold soda, or something that was immediate
Mhm.
consumption type, it's no longer temperature, at the right temperature, and it creates a lot of problems,
Yeah.
not only for the consumer but also for the retailer themselves.
Okay. And how are shoppers adjusting in the places where those have been implemented?
So one of the categories that I focused my research on is candy, gum, and mints. I'm
Mhm.
just for simplicity, I'm just going to call it candy.
Yeah.
But when we look at that category specifically, that's an important category for retailers and for
Mhm.
SNAP shoppers. So when you look at SNAP households overall, they spend about $5 billion a year on the candy category. Excuse me. It's about 13%
Mhm.
share. The convenience store makes up about $150 million of that. If you look specifically at the states where a waiver is actively in place, where benefits cannot be used on candy, that's about 21% of SNAP household spending when it comes to candy. That's about $1
Mhm.
billion that would be
Wow.
at risk. So I wanted to understand, I talked to SNAP households. I wanted to understand if you couldn't use your benefits on the category, the candy category anymore, what's the implication? How important are SNAP benefits to you actually shopping the category? And what I found was that 68% said that, yes, SNAP benefits are really important to me shopping this category. I think the biggest takeaway that I had was that only 23% said that they would continue shopping the category as they have, even if they couldn't use their benefits.
Mm.
That means 77% are going to make some kind of a change.
Yeah.
It could be completely discontinuing shopping the category. It could be looking for cheaper alternatives. It could be just buying less frequently. But if you look at just those states that have an active waiver in place, and you use that 77%, people said that they would make some sort of a change. That's $800 million plus in risk just in the states that have an active waiver. If you expand that, say that the waiver goes nationwide, you're talking almost $4 billion.
Wow.
115 million of that is in the C-store channel. So there's significant risk to these sorts of waivers being put into place.
So now, how are the stores reacting to that? Are they starting to change up their assortments based on that?
I don't think we've really seen a lot of that yet. I suspect that as time goes on and potentially the waivers continue to change, we might see stores start to change the
Mhm.
footprint as far as their assortment. I think it's too soon at
Yeah.
this point. We've already heard about states potentially changing some of the waivers that are already out there because they are confusing, not only for the retailer, but for the shopper. So I think it's too soon to say
Mhm.
what the end impact will be, but I do think it's feasible that we'll see
Yeah.
assortment changes.
And so we're in that limbo kind of in
Mhm.
between. And who knows if some of these will be reversed the next
Exactly.
administration.
Exactly.
Or maybe they'll stick and people will say, you know what, maybe these health things are important
hmm
to keep going,
hmm
right? We already saw the food pyramid change and all.
Yeah.
So maybe that'll lead to a permanent change. But again, right now we're in that spot where we don't know.
But I think that raises an interesting point. So there's this myth that SNAP benefits enable consumers to eat unhealthy food,
Mhm.
and that they're being used on unhealthy foods, and that's certainly true. SNAP benefits are eligible for
Mhm.
foods that are more processed and are less healthy. But there was some interesting research that just came out. It was the Food Health Co. using NIQ data that actually busted that myth. So the scope of the research was to understand the average food health score for an average American and how that food health score differs among those on SNAP. And the big takeaway from the piece was that the average American gets a 48 out of 100. So anybody that remembers taking a test in high school or whatever, if you got a 48 on it, that's an F.
That's too good. Yeah.
So the average American fails when it comes to food health scores. The most fascinating thing about this research that I found was when you look at the average SNAP household, they actually score 2.4 points higher than the average household overall. Still enough. But saying that SNAP benefits are enabling people to eat unhealthy doesn't really hold up because they actually eat just a little bit healthier than the average American does anyway.
Well, it's very interesting. And I wonder how long that's going to last. Like this has only been in place for what, 6 months, maybe 3/4 of a year when they started talking about the waivers.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. I mean, it could go a lot of different directions. You did mention something to me off camera that I wanted you to talk a little bit about, that Twix Snickers bar thing, because I think that's really important too. Is that how they fall into it, what might fall into that restriction and what might not, and how that can cause confusion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to like I was talking about with the soda versus the orange juice or the apple juice, the sugary beverages. Some of the states are actually looking at the ingredient panel to make the determination for what can and can't be SNAP eligible. And in the case of Twix, there are some states that are saying that no, that is eligible for SNAP benefits because the percentage of wheat flour is too high. So it's not technically being classified as a candy bar. So again, it's just another point of confusion for the consumer and for the associate at the store and for the retailer that's managing the database of items that they're selling and where the SNAP benefits can go versus where they can't go.
And then, so a lot of there's tech involved in that too.
Absolutely.
But then what about a smaller C-store chain or something that's not as tech savvy?
It creates so many challenges. It's going to create an environment where you're going to have retailers being fined because they're applying the benefits incorrectly. There's going to be situations where the shopper at the point of sale is going to get upset with the store associate because they don't understand why their benefits aren't allowed. And the store associate might not be in a position where they can actually explain to them the legislative change that's changed what they can or can't use their benefits on.
Yeah, so there's a lot of spillover effects.
Absolutely.
That into other areas, other aspects of the retail operation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one area of wellness and the impact on the C-stores. Then also you have booze, THC beverages, cigarettes, right? People are drinking less. What's happening in that category? That seems to be dropping more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look across the United States, alcohol consumption is at a new low. So people are actively choosing to drink less. We just came out of January. I'm waiting on my dry January numbers from this year, but I know from last year, around 61% of people that said I'm participating in dry January, around 61% actually drank less in the month of January. So there is an intentional effort to consume less alcohol. Now, in the convenience channel, especially for beer, convenience is certainly a destination. The ability to have quick in and out chilled options is obviously huge for consumers who are looking for that. But as continued moderation is out there, as consumers are looking for other options, whether it's a THC beverage or other non-alcoholic beverages, mocktails, non-alcoholic wine, beer, etc. There's a lot happening in that space. I think technology is playing a role. Health and wellness is playing a role. I also think finances are playing a role. People are cutting back on alcohol because it's expensive, and they're trying to find ways to cut back on what they're ultimately spending on.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of things just anecdotally. I'm 54, and all of my friends in my age group have cut down dramatically on alcoholic beverages. And a couple things. One, we've all been focused more on longevity, right? What we're doing now, we're really focusing on how it's going to benefit us when we're 80.
Sure.
And a lot of that it started before the pandemic, but that kind of accelerated when everyone started realizing, wow, we've got to take care of ourselves. But what's happening is also people in my age range tend to have more responsibilities at work, and they need to be on point.
Sure.
So now, if I have more than a couple of beers, I'm not 100%
Sure.
the next morning, and I don't want that.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing like those things. Plus, a lot of the media that people are listening to, podcasts. There's so many wellness podcasts that all you're hearing about is the impact of alcohol on health and all that. So, but then at the same time, the THC beverages seem to be fit that role of like an alternative that's, I guess should put it in air quotes, healthier than alcoholic beverage. What are you seeing in that? How those two segments are interplaying?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly seeing significant growth in the sale of THC beverages. In the channels that we track and have THC beverage sales up about 134% over the past year. So definitely a significant growth area. And just thinking where I live in the Chicagoland area, you can go to breweries, and breweries now have their own THC beverages. There are some bars that are even selling THC beverages that you can consume while you're on premise. So certainly a lot of interest there, but I think it's still early. I think identifying who the right shopper for a THC beverage is important. It may or may not be the hardcore cannabis user. Those consumers have likely already been using the product for a long time. They have their go-to products that they look for. I also think, 10, 15 years down the road from now, will THC beverages have the same kind of view that people are applying against alcohol today, where we do see people moderating and drinking less? It's possible that we'll see THC beverages go to that same spot. There's also people that use both. They have their THC, whether it's a beverage or a gummy or a vape or whatever it is, but they have alcohol at the same time. And it's kind of stacking the two different things on top of each other. So a lot of it's going to come down to the way the legislation changes as well. So I think it's a high growth area, but I think it's one that we have to have a cautious eye on, because things can change dramatically and rapidly.
It's almost like the whole CBD thing several years ago, like in 2018 or whatever. You have some of the retailers have jumped right in, some, especially on the restaurant side, they jumped right in. And then other larger chains are maybe sitting back and waiting a little bit. Some are getting into it. And then it also depends, are you in a legal recreational state and are you not?
Exactly.
Because then that changes things too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's so much wait and see going on. There's interest. I spoke to several buyers last year at our adult beverage session, and they were all interested. There's all have demand from their customers, but some of them are jumping in, some are dipping their toe in the water, and some are taking a wait and see, just see what happens with everybody else. But they said there's no doubt there's great brands out there, great flavors, and they're amazed at how far they've come with the flavors of those beverages.
Yeah.
So now we get to tobacco, and that's changed too with the different vehicles. What are you seeing there at the convenience store?
Yeah, so I talked at the beginning, 193 billion in CPG sales plus food service. It's around 173 billion if you strip out the food service part. 90% of that comes from just three departments. Tobacco and tobacco alternatives is the number one contributor to overall C-store CPG sales. But cigarette smoking has continued to decline and decline and decline for many, many years. So as I was working on content for the conference today, I don't know why I kept going back to this idea of a ship anchor. And as people continue to smoke less and less and less, and because that is the number one contributing category to CPG in C-stores, we need a new anchor. As consumers are pulling back on that category, what else are they purchasing? We know certainly trips for cigarettes in C-store are down, but if you think about pouches, trips for pouches are up significantly, up 70+% over the past year. But I think it's also important, while trips for pouches are up, this idea of being healthier, being more conscious about what we're putting into our body, and this need to switch anchors doesn't necessarily mean the new anchor is going to be pouches. What other categories can serve in that role? As I was doing some research, I found 1 in 5 tobacco trips at a C-store is also a beverage trip. That's a very valuable occasion. And while the tobacco product might have been the original trip anchor, 20% of those trips include a beverage. So is there a possibility that the beverage could become that replacement anchor for those consumers who are either smoking less or who are stopping cigarette usage altogether? Just to contextualize it, that 20% of trips, that's worth $1 billion, and $1.2 billion rather, in beverages. Number one are soft drinks. About 38% of those tobacco trips include a soft drink. That's worth about $388 million. Energy drinks, I think, is the one, though, that really jumped out. 29% of the trips for tobacco include an energy drink. That's almost $440 million. So I think there's a huge opportunity to think about other categories that are relevant to the tobacco, to the cigarette user, but thinking about switching the anchor product that brings those consumers into the store.
Nicotine pouches actually fill a very unique niche too, because they lay a little bit in the wellness space too, because you have a lot of the wellness personalities out there, the influencers, the biohackers, are all talking about nicotine pouches as a focus ratchet.
Yeah.
So there you have someone that's completely healthy, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke any weed, nothing, but they're when they're writing, they're using nicotine pouches. So it's almost as if it's lays within the tobacco and supplement, like nootropic space, in people's minds anyway. So I'm curious to see, as shoppers become more wellness minded, if that has an impact on the nicotine pouches too.
It certainly might. It would be likely a specific consumer within that wellness space that leans into it, but I could certainly see a future where that does play a larger role in what people think about from a wellness perspective.
Gotcha. What about vapes? Are they still doing them? Are they still? I don't see they're still selling them.
Yeah, I mean, vapes are still performing. I mean, I think going back to the idea of THC, you've got vapes in that space as well. So I think as people think about wellness and they think about what goes into their body, I think that the vapes are certainly facing some challenges with the chemicals that you ingest when you use those types of products. But they're still selling, and it's something that consumers are still certainly interested in.
Gotcha. And you have fewer players with the vapes. Most of them have been acquired by the major tobacco companies, and then all the specialized ones, people usually go at vape shops.
Yeah, exactly.
For those. So that's that's a different segment. So although in New York you have some of the convenience stores are selling THC, they're selling vapes, they're selling a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Some of them are not selling it in a licensed way anyway. But so overall, like, what opportunities are you seeing? So consumers are generally a little more wellness focused these days. What opportunities does that create for C-stores? Areas that maybe they're not focusing on now that they could dive into to address these?
Sure. I think focusing in on the consumer that's really looking for better products is important. I've been doing a lot of research on trust and the way that consumers assign trust to brands and to retailers. And I really think that trust is the biggest asset that a brand or a retailer has. If the consumer doesn't trust you, they're not going to buy your product. They're not going to shop in your stores. So I think really leaning into what the shopper is looking for, but doing so in a way that's unmistakably transparent. And why I think that's important, and I've been talking about this for a while now with clients, manufacturers, retailers, et cetera. We are seeing more consumers using those scanning apps. I did some research May of last year. Around 17% of the consumers I talked to said that they were using third-party scanning apps. Could be Yuka, could be Olive. There's a couple others that are out there. I just did some new research. I'm in the process of creating some new content. That's 25% now. That went from 17% in May to 25% in end of January.
Now, are they using these? They're using them in a store? Okay.
Wow, they're walking the aisles and they're scanning the products. And I think that jump from 17, to 25% is important. But there's another 26% of consumers that are aware of the apps that just haven't tried using them yet. So if we say we get those 26%, they're using the apps. That's now more than half of consumers who are using third-party independent scanning apps to make purchase decisions. I think that's a concerning number and something that every retailer and every manufacturer should be thinking about. But I can't remember all of my numbers here. I have some new research that just came back. So when I talk to those consumers that are using those scanning apps actively today, whether they do it all the time or occasionally using the apps, I wanted to understand, what's your level of trust in what a product's package tells you compared to what the app tells you.
Mhm.
7% said that they trust the product's label more than the app. 27% said that they trust the app more than the label. So everybody else kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
They're the same, or I don't trust either of them. But the number that I think should scare manufacturers is that 87% said if your product gets a bad score, has artificial ingredients in it, the product's going back on the shelf.
Wow. Okay.
And I think that's a number that manufacturers should be scared about.
Mhm.
These third-party apps are coming after brands. They're exposing them for what they are and for what they're not.
Mhm.
And in today's tech-forward, you're constantly connected, whether it's social media or artificial intelligence, scanning apps, etc.
Yeah.
It is so easy to go down the rabbit hole on this stuff. Most of my research I do on my corporate computer, my corporate phone. I don't do it on my personal stuff. My Instagram feed is full of, I can't believe this brand has this ingredient in it, or I can't believe this brand has 45 ingredients in a taco shell.
Mhm.
It's so easy to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that retailers and manufacturers need to be thinking about. And as you think about this, the convenience channel being vice driven, it's cigarettes, it's alcohol, it's snacks.
Mhm.
The products that consumers are leaning into are the ones that are better. So as you think about kind of the low hanging fruit opportunity, it's thinking about the assortment in the store today. And do you really have an assortment that caters to what today's shopper is looking for? They scan your products and every single one on the shelf gets a bad score. You might not convert them into buying anything on that particular trip.
Yeah, and you have influencers like who's that? The Food Babe,
There's tons
right?
of them. Yeah.
She's comparing like the ingredient panels from something bought in Canada
Yeah.
to the same thing bought in the United States.
Yeah.
But it's people like that have gotten other people interested in those apps, and so are they looking for maybe things with more protein, things with more fiber, probiotics? I know some beverages are starting to get the probiotics in there.
Yep.
They're making their way to my local convenience stores. But so just things with more healthy attributes and less artificial stuff.
Yeah. It's more healthy attributes, it's less artificial stuff, but there's also this trade-off between something that might be ultra processed that has a lot of protein in it. I don't have research on that yet. I'm actually in flight with that research right now. But what's the tipping point?
Yeah.
How much protein makes an ultra processed product good? How little protein makes it even worse for you?
And then it depends on what their definition, right? Like
Yeah.
my definition, personally, my personal thing is get as close to single ingredient food as possible. That's what I want. But some people may think high protein, that's healthy, regardless of if everything else is artificial.
Yeah.
Which brings up my next point, right? With the protein, GLP-1s. That's having an impact on all of this too.
Absolutely.
What are you seeing?
So I think GLP-1s are fascinating. We, as an industry, we talk about GLP-1s as this negatively disruptive thing. It's making people eat less food. It's bad for the industry. But we see such interesting trends that come out of this. When you look at a GLP-1 using consumer, the way that they're choosing to consume is different. There are attributes that they're prioritizing. They want protein. They're trying to avoid becoming malnourished. They want something with low sugar. They want probiotics to help with the gut microbiome and aid with digestion. We see growth in those sorts of claims, the claims that really matter to these consumers, off the charts. If you look at a GLP-1 user, when they're about 270 days into treatment, their consumption of products that contain probiotics is up almost 200%. It's changing consumption patterns. Similarly, if you look at a GLP-1 consumer that snacks, salty snacks versus, let's say, meat snacks. Meat snack consumption skyrockets. 270 days in, we're up almost 90%. Well, it makes sense. Protein. Single ingredients, fewer ingredients. It's a snack that supports what they're ultimately trying to do: lose weight, but still consume things that help their bodies. On the flip side, salty snacks decline. You see decline in 90 days in, 180 days in, 270 days in, because the product just doesn't deliver against what that shopper is ultimately looking for. But I think there's also an important component about understanding what's the role of the product, because the role of a product for a GLP-1 user is different. When I was talking with somebody else the other day, I brought up a slide that showed fragrance purchasing, and it compared fragrance purchasing among GLP-1 households versus non-GLP-1 using households. Fragrances are up 97% among those using GLP-1s compared to those not using.
Do you know why?
One of the anecdotal evidence, but GLP-1 users oftentimes report having an odor after starting the medication because your body is processing things differently. And one of the hypotheses that's driving fragrance purchasing up among those consumers is that they're trying to mask the odor that their body is emitting because they are on these medications. It's the same reason that you see candy, gum, and mints growing, category that intuitively wouldn't not be growing with someone trying to lose weight. But we see dollar buy rates up, unit buy rates up, trips are up for those categories among those shoppers. And again, anecdotal, but there are people that complain about having Ozempic breath, Ozempic tongue, bad breath when they're on these medications because of the way your body processes things. So the hypothesis is that these categories, it's not candy because it's candy. It's candy because I'm going into a meeting and I have bad breath because I'm on GLP-1s. So the reason that shoppers on these medications lean into certain categories versus lean away from others might not necessarily seem intuitive at the front. So more research is really needed to understand, why are you using this now, and why maybe weren't you using it before? How are you using it different? How did the role of the product change?
So I can see a convenience store having a GLP-1 section with meat snacks, probiotic drinks, mints, fragrances, some body sprays, all mixed in on one
GLP-1
category.
starter kit.
Yeah. So
you do see brands though that are actually putting on there that they're GLP-1 friendly or GLP-1 compliant type products. So that helps give a cue to the shopper who's on it, who goes to the shelf and I'm on GLP-1s. I don't really know what product I need. Well, this one says it's GLP-1 friendly, so it makes my job easier.
Yep, until that gets out of control, and then it's like, here's GLP-1 friendly water.
Exactly.
And they slap it on everything.
Yeah, it's the whole joke with gluten-free water from years ago.
Yeah, right. Or plant-based garden salad.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? So, all right. So we covered this the CPG side. What about let's wrap up on the food service side. What's happening on the food service side? Is this impacting that side as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the food service side, I think, is interesting. It's a newer area that we're focusing on at NIQ. But why I think food service is so important for C-stores, when you think about store choice drivers, the snacks that you have is the number one. Number two, gas prices are number one. But after you get aside from gas prices, the snacks are what ultimately drive the choice of what C-store you go to. You go a little bit further down that list, it's the hot beverages that you offer, it's the fresh prepared foods that you offer, and it's the fountain drinks that you offer. Those are some of the top store choice drivers for consumers that are shopping the channel. So it's certainly an area that consumers are interested in, and the C-stores are working to deliver on. That being said, there are some headwinds. We talked at the beginning about inflation, the state of the economy, consumers being more choiceful about where they're spending their money. 37% are planning on dining out less this year. They're planning more at-home meal occasions. That certainly creates a challenge for C-store prepared foods and beverages because we're trying to eat at home more. So I think there's a financial challenge to it. I also think there's a headwind just in terms of perception. Consumers largely don't think of the convenience channel as being on par with quick serve restaurants, who I would argue is your biggest competitor from a food service perspective. They think of fast food restaurants as the place to get a meal, the place to get a snack, the place to get a beverage. So I think there's a perception play there as well that is slowing down the growth that we're seeing in C-store prepared foods. That being said, there are some advantages. For a consumer that's looking for something fast, the convenience channel is designed to be fast. So that certainly is a benefit. It's also multi-purpose. If you need to pick up milk and maybe a couple of other things while you get a sandwich or a specialty coffee, you can do that at the same time. So I think there are some unique benefits there that the convenience channel offers that a quick serve restaurant just can't. I also think there's a huge opportunity for the convenience industry to learn from what's not working well in quick service restaurants. 44% of quick serve restaurant guests want better quality food. 39% want healthier options. 28% want greater menu variety. So it's better options, better quality, healthier ingredients, loyalty programs, cleaner facilities, faster service. There's all kinds of issues, if you will, that shoppers have with what's happening in quick serve. So how do we take some of those things and turn them into competitive advantages in C-store with C-store prepared food? So it's really about combating the financial headwinds, building the consumer perception, building up the perception around C-store prepared, but then learning from what's not working well in quick service and making the experience in C-store better.
Gotcha. A lot of opportunities. I just wish I had some of these really cool convenience stores in New York City. we tend to have those small ones with very limited things and barely any food service, except maybe a couple of hot dog rollers, and that's it.
There are some, as I drive across, I'm from Illinois, but as I drive across the state to go see family that live in Southern Illinois, there is a convenience store. It's massive. It's, I think, the biggest one that I've ever been to. It is a destination. There are so many different types of prepared foods. They've got breakfast sandwiches and burritos and pizza and popcorn and cookies, and the store is massive. And I mean, it's one of those places that I intentionally stop at. It's not that far where I need to stop for gas there. That's where I go to get gas because I always go inside, and they have so much stuff, and the facilities are immaculate.
Yeah.
I joke, but the restroom facilities are so clean that, I mean, you could bring your food in there. It's literally that clean.
Another world, definitely, especially compared to the ones in the city.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, listen, thanks for joining us. Thanks for speaking today.
Of course.
And appreciate all the insights.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.